Opening day of the season, and frankly, I think Liverpool were lucky to get away with a point from Craven Cottage. Fulham are not the kind of side you want to play early on in the season. Marco Silva and those guys hit the ground running. Obviously, it's a huge season for a lot of these guys trying to stay in the Premier League, and they want to get as many points in the bag before Christmas and therefore the World Cup as possible. It was a weird match, to be honest, if you're watching from a Liverpool perspective, but a great game if you're watching from a Fulham perspective. For a while, there have been these feelings around Liverpool that there are deficiencies within the side that some people fear could be exposed. And you could see that Marco Silva had given quite detailed explanations and ideas to his players that they needed to undertake out on the field. If you want to talk about the front line, then they were always trying to cut out the pass to Mo Salah. They managed to get him quite quiet today, apart from in that period when Liverpool looked their most dangerous. Then, if you look on the other side with Luis Diaz, there was a lot of shutting down of him, very tight onto him. Don't let him get into open space, don't let him dribble. And despite the fact he got the ball in the back of the net when Andy Robertson was in fact, very far offside, he did have a few other opportunities, but only when he wasn't in one of the positions where we're attacking for quite a while. In fact, they were all sort of came out of the chaos. Then you've obviously got Bobby Firmino, who I think is still transitioning into whatever this new Liverpool formation feels like. It doesn't feel like the same formation that Liverpool played last season. It feels like there's a slightly different shape in midfield. There's a slightly different expectation on Firmino. And frankly, I think Fulham took full advantage of that. On the other end of that, Mitrovic probably had one of the best games that I've seen him have in the Premier League. And I think obviously he's motivated to play up against the likes of Virgil van Dijk. Note on that, Virgil van Dijk, this is one of the first times I've ever seen him looking like he didn't particularly want to approach a player. It wasn't the only time when Liverpool conceded a penalty that he didn't look like he particularly wanted to approach Mitrovic. Clearly Mitrovic's strength, and I mean strength in a physical sense, is a huge asset for him. But on the other side of that, he had great feet, he led the line really well, and there were plenty of other really encouraging factors, I'd imagine, for Fulham, which will probably buoy them early on in the season. The only issue with Marco Silva's sides is very often they do hit the ground running like we've seen today with Liverpool, and then they begin to drop away. There's a huge intensity, there's a huge amount of concentration and a huge amount of pressure on those guys to execute exactly what Marco Silva wants to do there. And that's fantastic, he's a great manager. But I think alongside that, that does mean players burn out very quickly. And there is not Bielsa level of burnout here, because I don't think they're pressing nearly as much as them. But there is that level of, okay, how long is this sustainable? I did feel that with Liverpool, if I'm honest. And I think Liverpool have become a more patient side, because very often they realise that other sides will, I don't know, not last as long as them, will not have the same legs in some way, or possibly also just fall away and then leave lots of space for Liverpool. And of course, that is partly what Liverpool's tactics and therefore strategy do throughout the game. If you tire them out with Firmino, you have defenders constantly coming into the game, obviously from that back line with Firmino, and then suddenly you bring Nunez on, Firmino's running towards the ball, Darwin's running away from it. So with those two ideas juxtaposed, it must be very difficult when you're a player out on the field going, okay, we've just played an hour this way, how are we meant to play now? I don't think Liverpool wanted to make the change at exactly that point, but they did. And frankly, I think a lot of things were just off about Liverpool. Probably all of the worst things that you would have listed about Liverpool got found out or got highlighted. And I don't think this will probably be the last time that happens for Liverpool. I also probably think that there are other times where Liverpool will be able to dig themselves out of this, like they have done in the past. But I do think other teams are going to be looking to exploit that in Liverpool this season. And around that, we'll see people trying to focus on Trent at the back post. You've seen that not only happen to Trent, by the way. There's a lot of Trent bashing going on Twitter. But frankly, it happens the same with Kyle Walker at Man City. Liverpool, in their last 3 seasons, have scored 3 goals against Kyle Walker because he gets caught under the ball. I don't see anyone highlighting that. On the other side of that, you've also then obviously got the fact that Andy Robertson is constantly bombing forward. You've got the fact that I don't think Liverpool's midfield shape is quite there yet. And the guy that I made the documentary on, Jordan Henderson, has had a few games in a row now where it really just hasn't looked like it's been his season so far. He's looked different physically, actually. I think he's trying to rebuild his body in a slightly different way. He's probably getting used to that. And whilst that's not an excuse, I don't think you should ever try and excuse these poor performances. There's a lot of poor passes in there as well. There's a lot of times where he doesn't quite look comfortable. And I'm always trying to work out why. I'm trying to work out if that's the role that he's trying to play within Klopp's system, whether there's a mental side there where he's not quite sure what it is that he's trying to do within the team, or whether they're actually asking him to do something that's quite difficult within his Liverpool side and link up certain players whilst also covering for others. That's a very big challenge. It takes a lot of mental energy. But so far we haven't seen Jordan Henderson performing to the max level. And whilst he hit the bar at the end of the game, I mean, that would have been a great redemption for Liverpool, but probably not really deserved, to be honest. They were not at the game in the first half in the way that you would want them to be. I thought the commentary from BT was not great, if I'm honest, today. It was quite reductive. It wasn't particularly good analysis. But Liverpool, the fact is Liverpool weren't really at the same level as Fulham, and Fulham hit the ground running. They did exactly what you'd hate if you were Liverpool as well. They went out there, they got physical, they got close, they pressed in the same way that Liverpool would press, and so essentially cut out a lot of the spaces that Liverpool wanted to be in. And then they were also just ever so slightly too physical in the way that Liverpool hate. You see that a lot in the Champions League. You also see it when Liverpool play the top sides. They try and bash them off the ball and those kind of things. And that is kind of actually what changed the game. It was a late reaction from Klopp, but he put on Milner. It was Milner for Fabinho. Fabinho didn't look like he was at the races. Thiago obviously got another injury, and Henderson just wasn't quite having the game. No, he wasn't having the game he wanted at all. Milner comes on, and I think that was the beginning of the change for Liverpool. It got them a foothold in midfield, got them a lot more combative, and then the other change was Harvey Elliott and Nunez. I think Klopp wants to be able to pair some combinations of subs up within there to be able to shift things for Liverpool. Harvey Elliott's feet were fantastic. I thought he held possession really well. It's a great combination with Mo Salah, Trent, and there's a nice little triangle there that can become a quad if Jordan Henderson wants to move into that. It is worrying at this point that Liverpool haven't signed another midfielder. Their midfield is littered with injuries, and I think at this point they need to learn from the previous seasons where there have been injuries and there have been problems. You can't just write a season off because this side is not an apex. I do think Liverpool were expecting to sign one more midfielder this season. You saw them they went for Tchouaméni. I definitely think they went in for Bellingham, and they were probably disappointed to find out he just was flat out not available this summer. And then there's also a number of other midfielders around the 50 to 60 million pound mark that I think they were in for. They've now got Curtis Jones, Thiago potentially, and Oxlade-Chamberlain injured, alongside another raft of injuries as well within there. Konate's out for indefinite amount of time. And I think there's a disappointment that Liverpool haven't tried to go in maybe harder into the transition they're in. This is, by the way, very much a side in transition. There are a lot of changes and there's a lot of difference in training, I'd imagine. You can be a lot more consistent in your training when you have Mane, Salah, Firmino, probably Jota as well. I think Jota will make a big difference to this side when he returns. But either injuries and bedding new positions and players in has hindered Liverpool. And I also think Liverpool, and they've done this a couple of times, underestimated what Fulham were going to bring to the game. And I think that's probably a squad issue rather than a Klopp issue, but Klopp probably needs to impress that on the players a little bit more. It's too often now where I'm seeing that Liverpool are coming into games, they're not looking particularly motivated, or they look quite sluggish sometimes. And it seems strange because those were the games last season where Liverpool missed out by 2 points against Man City. The criticism was, you've drawn too many games. So you can't just have the same things happen this season. And you can't expect to be coming from behind in a lot of these positions now. So the disappointing aspect for Liverpool, and I think for everyone else, is going to be that they dropped points today. Not because they were good, but because this Fulham side should have been a side that Liverpool would beat if they have the ambitions of winning the league, if they have the ambitions of doing what they did last season. But they didn't stretch them in the way that you would want them to be stretched. Liverpool are worthy of plenty of criticism today. I could pretty much go through the whole side and talk about the critical aspects there. I've not even gotten onto the back line yet. Let's talk about them for a second. Trent caught out of position a number of times and obviously caught under the ball. I can understand getting caught under the ball. I think there aren't many right backs in the league who are going to enjoy playing Mitro this season. I think he's probably going to catch quite a few of them on the hop. I think Mitro also caught Van Dijk a number of times. I've evaluated that. And I think Joel Matip is probably the strongest of the two players at this point that are going to go alongside Virgil. I actually think he had the best game in the back line. Andy Robertson at times, I thought, his intensity is fantastic, but the execution is sometimes not quite there. It's strange to see when he's looking almost forward at certain positions and he could cut the ball back a little bit more. I'd like to see Andy Robertson combining a little bit more with the likes of Diaz. I don't think that combination and partnership is quite there yet in the same way as he had with Sadio Mane. And that's the point, is it's not necessarily about missing Mane, and whilst they do literally miss Mane, and we saw him climb up on the fence doing that great stuff with the Bayern fans last night, it's the disappointment of not having these new combinations, and you've got to work up those new relationships and new ideas within that to make Liverpool a stronger, more cohesive, and I want to say like a unit that play with their gut, like Jurgen Klopp's been talking about for years now. So Fulham deserved probably a win today, to be honest. I'm sure it's a penalty. I definitely think they clash knees. I think Van Dijk shouldn't have hung a leg out there, and I think when your knees clash, it's silly. The only argument against that would be, I don't actually think Mitro was going to make that ball. I think Trent makes that quite easily. But once the referee's called it as a penalty, you're also not going to overrule. If the referee had called it the other way, I also don't think they overrule it that way either. So, goes both ways. Liverpool, scrappy goals, but let's finish on Darwin Nunez. Nunez came on, and it did change the game. I think, first of all, I love his confidence in trying to finish with that little flick. Frankly, it didn't come off twice. The first time it didn't come off, hit the goalkeeper. Second time, he actually did miss the ball. It came back and hit him again. So the execution is not there from Darwin Nunez so far, but he gets into the right positions. He's definitely a huge threat. And when he puts on just a little more muscle, because I want to see him fill out that frame a little bit, be able to bash up against people, get a little bit more physical with that back line, then we'll see a big difference. There is still a mentality issue where I do wonder if when the chips are down, do Liverpool have enough chip down players? Do Liverpool have enough players they can rely on in those positions? I think Mane was one of those. You would have seen him bash up against the opposition, etc., etc. Let me know what you think of the composition of the squad. Do they need one more midfielder? Will there be someone else coming in? Should there be someone else coming in? And should Liverpool really be making a short-term sacrifice with the idea that obviously next year they're going hard for Bellingham, and if they don't get Bellingham, then there probably is a bit of trouble at the club. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be interested to know what your analysis is of the game, whether you think this continues. I personally see a lot of teams trying to exploit similar things this season against Liverpool. I think it's going to be tricky, but I didn't think that Liverpool would fall at this first hurdle this season. A point is not good enough on the opening day of the season, and I think it's fantastic that Mo Salah has scored 6 of the last opening days of the season. Fantastic. The bigger issue is, outside of the personal things, it's the link up of the team, the cohesion. I don't think it's quite there yet. But let me know in the comments below. I'll be interested to see what your analysis is. Fulham, congratulations. Great point. If you can continue that, Fulham stay in the league. My only prediction is I don't think they stay in the league. Marco Silva, though, what a manager. Liverpool don't like playing him. See you guys in a little while. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the weekend's football. I will be back with more analysis. See you later. Bye.